My 20 thrown down in my fist rage, and the man to my left is 40 down. Charming doubled up with royal blush. I had 3 jacks and a pen 9.
Welcome to T-Bone's Best of Roanoke show. Music, comedy, and conversation featuring HB, the Honey Badger.
Honey Badger don't care.
Now, on with the show.
HB, we are Corned Beef and Company tonight. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good, T-Bone.
We have with us tonight a very, very special guest. I call him the voice, and he's Craig Wright. Craig, welcome to T-Bone's Best of Roanoke show.
Thank you very much.
We have been listening to you off and on. If you've lived in Roanoke over the years, you know Craig's voice from WFIR, Cox Cable, and we're going to touch on that in a little bit. But he's also got a very unique thing going on here at Corned Beef where he deals cards.
Right.
And I want to learn more about that because I think I could win $1 million today. So anyway, welcome to the show. Bring us up to date. You know, we know you from years ago when you went on the radio and Cox Cable. So tell us a little bit, give us a background of how you got to this point today when you came to Roanoke. I think it was in the early 90s.
It was 1992 that my wife and I moved to Roanoke here. I'm originally a Michigander.
Wolverines.
Yeah, born in Grand Rapids, and then I moved to Florida at a fairly young age, 9 years old, but went back to Michigan to go to University of, which is where I graduated. And from there, went to West Palm Beach, Florida television, and then Bluefield, West Virginia television, Cleveland television, and then to Roanoke here, where I was working with a video production company when I first moved into this town. And then met, it was Doug Weary. I don't know if you know Doug St. Clair. He went on the air by the name of Doug St. Clair, and he was working with me on a audio project. He said, well, you got a voice. You should go check out and see if we could use you over at WFIR. So I went there, and I was with WFIR for about 8 years, I suppose, altogether.
Did you do like the morning show or?
Eventually what I did was I did morning drive on the FM station, which at the time that I was there was Light 95 FM, okay. Eventually became Arrow 94.9, but I did the morning drive with Bob Clark doing sports.
He's still there.
Have you done Bob Clark yet? Have you interviewed him yet? Because he'd be a good one.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I mean, boy, he's been on the air here forever. Yeah. And then I did that, the morning drive, and then at 9 o'clock I went over to the AM side and did my talk show from 9 to 10, which was a live 1 hour talk show every day, and it was varied topics. We did authors, we did a show with Mundy, Rogers, and Frith, we did a law show, we did the Lewis Gale Medical Hour, and then we would have just persons of interest, newsmakers, and call-ins so people could discuss the issues of the day.
Wow, every day, Craig?
5 days a week.
That's a lot of content.
It is a lot of content, but you get into a groove in doing it. And the folks that listened to the show were very happy to participate, and they kind of fill in the breaks. They fill in the gaps, you know.
Right.
So it was pretty easy to get through, and you get a routine, and there just never seemed to be a shortage of folks that wanted to come on and talk about things.
Now that was all radio.
It was.
Right? Now you did some TV.
After I finished up at WFIR, which was 2001, I got an opportunity at Cox Cable to do they asked me if I would want to do a public affairs program, and they let me kind of design the format for it, and I kind of fashioned it after the McLaughlin Group, which was on public television.
Yes.
But it was kind of more like a localized version of that, which I was the moderator. We would have a couple of media folks on, one from radio or television and one from the newspaper or one of the print mediums. Eventually we had folks on from the internet and that too. But we would have them on, and we would choose 2 or 3 issues for each half hour and ask questions. We'd get the I try to get opposing points of view, left, right, pro, con, whatever it was, to keep the conversation interesting, and I kind of just served as the moderator. But I did that for 7.5 years also.
Now, do you do voiceovers, Craig? Have you commercials or anything like
My
that?
name is Michael Caine. It takes a man in a tweed suit 5.5 seconds to fall from the top of Big Ben to the ground. From the top of Big Ben to the ground. Not a lot of people know that.
Oh, that is good.
Or I could do James Mason. I do voices, but I do voiceovers.
Yes, I do voiceovers and entertain with the voice.
Could I hear a little more of James Mason, please?
James Mason, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Captain Nemo.
Yeah.
Yes.
Believe me, the folks that come to my poker table, I try to entertain as much as deal cards, and they get tired of sometimes the folks that are there hear the same routines over and over. But
while you're dealing cards,
Yeah.
do you sometimes break out into a
Sometimes.
Michael Caine? That's extra added benefit there.
No, it's fun. It's always entertaining. There's a great core of a lot of regulars that come out to the table, and we have fun. And I've got a couple of regular sidekicks there, and I'll launch into a particular routine or a joke, and they've all heard it 50 times, and they just kind of roll their eyes. But I'll have a couple of some new audience members at the table, so it's a lot of fun.
Well, you've been dealing cards at Corned Beef and Company for 20 years.
Last August 2018 made 20 years at Corned Beef and Company, and I was dealing for about 2 years elsewhere in the Valley before that. So about 22 years altogether, but 20 plus years here at Corned Beef, yeah, 21st year.
That's a lot of cards, my friend.
It is.
Now, tell us about the situation you have here at Corned Beef. You're here Wednesday nights, Thursday nights, Friday nights, Saturday nights. Tell us that.
Sure.
What
It's
is all
Wednesday through Saturday nights, and we get started around 7 o'clock on Wednesdays and Thursdays, around 9 o'clock on Fridays and Saturdays, and I just have the one Texas Hold'em poker table, and it seats anywhere from 8 to 10 or 11 folks. And the thing is that you don't have to be here when the game starts. If you can't make it here at 7, you can join the game at 9 o'clock. As long as there's an open chair, you can join the game. The benefit of getting here early is that everybody kind of starts with a level playing field as far as chips. If you come later, some folks have built up chip stacks. You can still join the game, but it's $5 to play. For $5, you get a set of chips. A lot of folks, they can play all night on $5, so I think it's still one of the best entertainment values in town. If you happen to bust out, if you've had your fill, we'll say goodnight and see you next time. And if you want to play again, you buy in for another $5. But there's no payouts. There's no prizes or payouts, so it's not considered a gambling. It's just strictly an entertainment. The winner at the end of the night does get a free set of chips on their next visit, but that's about as far as it goes. But we have a good time.
I bet you do.
Yeah,
And
it's
then, of
fun.
course, you got people coming over if you want something to drink or eat.
Yep.
You're taking care of
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. Well, that's part of the whole thing is that you kind of relax. And a lot of times there have been a lot of other poker games in and around Roanoke, but they pass the deck around and you have to shuffle the deck and deal it, and you kind of have to take your turn. Not here. I do all that.
Okay, so there's no dealer chip that goes
There
in.
is a dealer chip that goes around because I'm dealing for everybody.
Oh, okay.
So I do all the shuffling, I do all the dealing, I take care of pushing all the chips around, and everybody else just kind of sit back. I know a lot of folks that come out here. It's good practice. It's good practice at a live table. You can play online and practice that way, but this is a good live experience.
Well, I want to get into that a little bit too about how you can you read other people. What is it? The word?
The tell.
The tell.
Right.
So I want to get into that in a minute.
Sure.
But you don't actually play then. You're just the dealer.
Sometimes I do. If it's a slow evening,
Okay.
I'll play a hand as well as deal. But normally, once the table starts to fill up, I'll step back and bow out of the game, and then just let the players take over. But if sometimes there'll be some nights, and there'll only be 3 or 4 of us seated at the table, and I'll play an extra hand just to kind of keep it interesting.
All right. So, we're used to playing 21 or Cincinnati
Right.
or Hearts or Spades. But tell us how Texas Hold'em, the basics of Texas Hold'em.
Well, if you've seen anything like the World Series of Poker, we're going to talk about movies. If you've seen the movie Rounders and that, Texas Hold'em essentially it's a variation of 7-card stud.
Okay.
Because you're playing with 7 cards. You've got 5 community cards on the table. You've got 2 hole cards. Those are exclusive to the player only. And once all the cards have been dealt and laid out on the table, you play your best 5 cards. You can play any combination. You can play all the cards on the table. You can play either one of your hold cards or both of your hold cards along with 3 on the table, whatever makes up your best poker hand. But you have to be, it's a very easy game to learn, but you do develop a sense of strategy as far as what are good starting hands, your chip stack versus other players' chip stacks, whether you're playing first or whether you're on the button, and so on. So there's a lot of strategy that way. But again, we have a lot of folks, and I mean a lot of folks that have come out to the table that have never played on a live table before, and part of what I do, part of what you're paying for, is I teach how to play the game. So I would encourage anybody that has ever wanted to play but has always been a little bit shy about doing, just come out, because it's very relaxed, it's very fun, it's very low key, and there's no pressure. You're not going to lose more than $5. I mean, you're going to you're going to get your set of chips, and you're going to have a good time, and you're going to learn a little bit about the game.
Okay, so if you didn't have a big depth of knowledge about playing Texas Hold'em, you could still come out, learn it, and have fun in a friendly environment.
Sure, and I think that anywhere between, after you've played about a half a dozen to a dozen hands, it all makes perfect sense as far as what's going on, and it's a very easy game to learn. A little bit tougher to, you continue to build your strategies and develop the, that part of the game, but learning the game is very simple.
All right, Craig, tell HB and I what are the key things for a good Texas Hold'em player? What's the key skills, or
Sure.
what makes up a good player in your view?
In my view, the main thing is paying attention to the game, paying attention to what everybody else is doing, kind of watching for patterns in that. Sometimes people will play crazy, especially at my table. They'll have to go and they'll start pushing really hard with the chips, and you got to kind of allow for that too. But generally, if you want to be a good player, you just have to, you can't be aloof. You can't be checking your phone when you're not involved in the hand, or looking off in the distance. I tend to, when I play, and sometimes I'll play in games that I'm not actually dealing in, but you just have to kind of watch very carefully what's going on. I don't mean you have to be so intense that you get burned out doing it, but if you're paying attention to the game, you have to understand the cards that are in your hand, the values of those cards. You got to understand your chip stack versus other chip stacks on the table, and how you because that makes a big difference too, whether you're playing what they call early in the hand or whether you're playing late in the hand, which would be on the button is the ideal position, because you get to watch on the second, third, and fourth round of betting. You get to watch everybody else before you have to make a decision on what you do.
Is that also called positioning?
It is position. That's exactly what it is. Doyle Brunson, probably one of the most famous, he wrote the book, the Power System book, the most famous poker book ever written, and he said that position is so important that he could play his hands without looking at his cards, strictly based on the position that he's at. I mean, I don't know how much truth there is to that, but I know that Doyle Brunson was an incredibly successful poker player, and I certainly understand what he means when he says that. The position is a very, very powerful thing.
Okay, so you got to pay attention. What about luck, Craig?
That's the great equalizer. That is the great equalizer, because while the game has a very high level of skill involved, luck plays a big part of it. Anybody that knows poker, has followed it at all, knows the name Chris Moneymaker, and he parlayed I don't know what it was like $100 satellite buy-in, and rode it all the way and won the World Series of Poker one year. And while he played well, you certainly have to have an element of luck involved in it too. You can get dealt 2 very bad cards, and if the board comes down and matches up what you happen to have in your hand, there's that luck element. You have to, and if you're a skilled player, you have to be able to recognize when someone has caught that lucky hand and maybe try to bow out of the hand early before you have a lot of chips invested in it. And if you happen to find yourself in a lucky situation, you have to know how to milk the chips from the other players. I guess one of the other things with regard to when talking about strategy in that is that, let's say you get dealt a 7-8 of hearts. Well, if you're playing that early in the position, you have to play it very differently than if you're playing it on the button. That's the whole positioning thing too. So, but you learn that, and the more you play, the more you perfect your game. And as long as I've been playing the game, I still feel like I learned things or I certainly get things reinforced. Like, oh yeah, that was a bad move. Remember that.
So if HB and I were playing with you right
Yeah.
now, we would each get 2 cards,
Right.
but in the middle,
Right.
there'd be 5 cards turned over,
Right.
and you turn them over one at a time, and after you turn over one, everybody has a chance to bet or check.
Right. Well, you get the 2 hole cards,
Right.
and everybody checks your hole cards, and you have to make your first wager based on those 2 cards. Then you get what's called the flop, and that's the first 3 cards. Those come down all at the same time. Boom, boom, boom.
That's the flop.
That's the flop. Then there's another round of betting. You get the next card, which in poker circles is either called 4th Street or the turn. And then there's another round of betting, and the last card is 5th Street or the river.
The river.
And then a final round of betting. And then after the 4 rounds of betting, assuming that everybody hasn't folded out,
Yeah.
cards are turned over, you find out who wins, and they rake in the chips.
Have you ever seen a royal flush?
Oh, yeah, we see royal flushes. Sure. Oh, yeah.
4 of a kind.
But it's a bit more common in Texas Hold'em than it is in, say, 5-card draw or some of the other games. I wouldn't say it's very common, but we'll see a royal flush maybe once a month, once every other month.
Well, one of the movies we'll probably talk about was called 21.
Mm-hmm.
But how big a part does math play into this Texas Hold'em, or does it play a part at all?
Of course, if you're a good player, it does. You calculate odds or presumed odds of something, meaning I've got so many chips involved in the pot. Someone makes a bet. Let's say I have 25 involved in the pot, and someone raises me for 100, and then someone else makes the call. You get a couple of folds. Now we've got plus the money that's already in the pot, and let's say you have 750 in the pot. Now you have to calculate that against, you know what your card is, you know what the cards already on the table are. You have to know what are the odds that I'm going to make my hand against what it's going to cost me to call that other part of the bet. And if it's going to pay me 8-1, where I'm only risking 3-1, then that's a good wager. On the other hand, if it's the reverse, if it's like 8-1 to call the pot, but it's only 3-1 that I'm going to hit, it's not such a good wager. So it kind of goes that way.
Okay, so math does.
Oh
play
yeah,
into it.
if you're doing it right.
If you're doing
Right,
it right.
if you-
Yeah. You
know the
can
game.
play just on gut instinct, but most of the best players that you see, the professional players, Daniel Negreanu, Phil Hellmuth, and some of the other real well-known names, Antonio Esfandiari is another one that's just an absolute wizard. They know to the fraction of the percentage what their odds are, how much it's going to cost them to make the wager, the bet. And that's the fascinating part of the game. It can be played instinctively, or you can get really, just like chess, you can get really deep into it if you want to. You can study it more, and you can try to get very detailed about it.
You're almost like a machine, it sounds like. That
It is.
You're able to calculate the odds.
Absolutely.
Wow, all right, here's something I'm very, very interested in.
Okay.
So let's say you're playing with us,
Uh-huh.
and we mentioned it earlier, tell, right? Now, explain that.
Sure.
What you're looking for as a polished poker player, what would you be looking for in HB&I that might tell you something about our hand?
Habits, breathing patterns.
Breathing patterns.
Absolutely. the way you might act differently from one card that's been dealt to another one. That's what I was saying before. If you're paying attention, a tell, and there's a wonderful more than a couple of moments in the movie Rounders where Matt Damon, his narration talks about the tells and what's going on. There's also a book called Caro's, C-A-R-O''S, Caro's Book of Tells, and he gets into all of that. And it can be a nervous habit. It can be the way someone shifts in their chair. It can be the way their eyebrows go up a little bit. It can be something very, very minute. It can be something a bit more obvious.
Right.
But the one thing I try to teach people at my poker table is that once you learn somebody's tell, don't tell them that you figured it out.
Right.
Then the cat's out of the bag. But no, it's great fun, and if you're paying attention at all, they're not foolproof. Tells are not foolproof, and even expert players can sometimes what they call Hollywooding. They can fake a tell. And so you have to be able to discern one from the other.
Okay.
I was watching YouTube videos today, and they were
Right.
talking about tails, Craig, and that's what came to my mind. Well, you got to assume people are going to watch these things, so they think Okay, well, I'm going to go counter to what might be a tell. But one of the things they talked about, if someone gets their cards and look at them real quick and they glance at their chips,
Right.
and that would indicate they have a good hand.
Right.
Right?
Like I said, if you watch a player with any regularity and they don't do it on a regular basis, and then all of a sudden they do, there's something different. There's something else going on. And it may be a great hand. It may just be something that they're kind of playing a whim, but you can kind of tell what their intent is going to be going forward in the hand, or at least you've got a hint of it. But if you're not paying attention, you don't pick up on those things.
Now, if HB was like watching the TV show while he's playing cards, he's not really paying attention, would you take that to be he doesn't have a strong hand?
Well,
Or not a good player.
yeah, or he's just disinterested and doesn't care about. I mean, especially when you're playing in a casual game, it's very different than when you're playing in a high stakes game. And of course, when you're watching a movie like Rounders and they're playing for thousands of dollars in a particular hand, there's usually not a whole lot of nonsense going on surrounding the game. The players are all very focused on what's going on. In a situation like when you play here, it's very casual, right. And you can try to pick up on tells. It's not as easy a thing to do in an environment like this is.
Okay. And one last thing on tells, because it just fascinates me. The term, if you show strength, that's really a weakness. If you show weakness, that's really a strength
right.
in your hand. Now, explain that. Is that fair to say?
I think that for the most part, that is true. But sometimes people are strong and they act strong. I mean, it's the nuances of it that are hard to pick up. But I think that's mostly true. There are also betting patterns that you can pick up on. You know, you get cards dealt, the first three cards come down on the table, everybody checks all the way around the table. The next card comes down, it seems like an insignificant card, you go check, check, and the next person puts out a bet. They may have hit that middle pair on the flop, but they were just a little apprehensive to bet it on the first round of betting. But since everybody checked around on the first go-around, now they feel a little bit more confident. And then when the hand's turned over at the end of the hand, assuming that there's a showdown, you're right, you're wrong, you log it in your brain for the next time, and if you have that recall, that just provides you with another little tiny edge. It's a fascinating game. It really is.
It is. There's so much to it.
Yeah.
Well, have you ever been to Vegas, Craig?
No.
Would you want to go?
Yes.
Because I hear they play cards.
When my son will turn 21 in December, and I'm sure that Vegas won't be too far after that. But I've done the bulk of my actual casino gambling was down in the Caribbean, Grand Bahama Island, and that. I lived in South Florida when I became an adult. I was still down in South Florida. I did that. I've been to Atlantic City a few times. I've never been to Vegas. I'm anxious to go to give it a try, though.
When you do go,
yeah.
Which place do you think you'll hit first?
I don't know. Everyone tells me go to the MGM. I'm not quite sure why, but that's where they tell me to go. If I'm going to Vegas, I'll probably take in a lot of the scenery in that. But I'm going there. I want to play. I want to play games.
Yes.
You know, I can go look at the scenery elsewhere, and I'm sure there are a lot of tourist attractions there. But I'd like to go there and get intense and play in some tournaments and cash games.
When you are going to play, like you were talking about down South Florida or Bahamas, wherever you said you played, you're playing with money in your pocket.
Right.
And now, is there a rule you go by, like there's front pocket money and back pocket money? Okay.
If you have some discipline about you, you only take what you can afford to lose,
Okay.
and you don't go anywhere beyond that. But you have to look at it like that. I mean, gambling is an entertainment, and that's the way it's meant to be. And it's not like that for some folks. But if you're asking me for my philosophy on it, you know, if I'm going to go to a casino and I'm going to take $1,000 with me, and I'm either going to win or I'm going to lose, and maybe I'll come back with a little bit more, maybe I'll come back with a little bit less, but it's entertainment money. It's like playing so many rounds of golf, you know, you put that money out there and you're not spending the last $1,000 that you have in your bank account to do it. That's entertainment money. Right. And but the nice thing is if you happen to get lucky early and win, you take that original buy-in, put it aside, so you know the worst you're going to do is going to break even. Then you, as they say, play with house money.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Well, as we kind of head into our last go-round here, I want to talk about movies, and you brought it up a couple of times. Rounders with Matt Damon.
Right.
That's a Texas Hold'em game. Obviously, you've watched it. Is that a good one to watch?
It's the quintessential Texas Hold'em movie. Absolutely. If you want to know about Texas Hold'em, I recommend that one highest. Texas Hold'em plays a part in the more recent Casino Royale, the one with Daniel Craig as James Bond, and that's pretty good too. Although it's a little bit more Hollywood version of Texas Hold'em. I think that Rounders gives you a little bit more of a real feel for the game. If you want to go a bit more vintage type stuff, a Cincinnati Kid with Carl Malden and Steve McQueen's a good one.
That's like in the 60s.
Yeah, that's the good old black and white. But there's a lot of good poker movies, a lot of kind of bad ones. But Rounders, it would be right at the top of my list.
I looked up a list of card movies, the top 100 today, and Rounders was number one. Casino Royale with James Bond, the 2008 version, I think it was in the top 10. The Sting.
The Sting's wonderful, right? Yeah.
Right?
Sure. Yeah, Paul Newman, Robert Redford, and Robert Shaw.
Yeah.
Right.
21's a movie that came out a few years ago,
Right.
but I think it's based on a true story
It
where
is.
some college kids
It
went out
is.
to Vegas and they used this guy's mathematical ability to win.
It's based on the book called Bringing Down the House, and it's about the MIT students and how the professor and the students all developed this theory and put it to practice. And quite honestly, what they were doing was not. A lot of people go, "Well, you can't count cards; it's illegal." It's not illegal at all. It's perfect. You can use your brain as much as you want to. The deal is, the casinos they don't have to allow you to play at their casino. So if they catch on to you that you're doing that, they can say, "Well, thank you very much. We'd prefer that you don't play here anymore." But yeah, that's 21. It was a kind of a nice reproduction because I read the book and saw the movie, and I thought you can only do so much in an hour and a half or hour 45 movie. But I think the book was excellent. So if you see the movie and like it, I highly encourage reading the book. It will give you a lot more backstory.
And that's called Bringing Down the House.
Bringing Down the House.
True story. All right, now, last thing, TV shows. I know on ESPN, it used to be big, the World Series of Poker.
Right.
Is that still on?
Sure, yeah. They still broadcast it every year. And that the actual event takes place now at the end of June and into July. And they've gotten to where that they are broadcasting live on ESPN, which is fascinating now because they do it. They used to shoot the whole thing, edit it, and then you would see it packaged starting in like August into September. But now they stream it live because what they've done is they've started to do this 20-minute delay where they can take the whole cards and you're actually seeing what's going on, but it's a 20-minute delay, so people can't run and tell another player what the whole cards are in that. And it's fascinating to watch. The thing is that it's a little bit dry because when you're seeing the packaged version of the show, it's all the kind of boring bits are taken out. Whereas when you're watching the live stream, you see a lot of hands where the players throw cards away, and it doesn't seem like a whole lot's happening. I find that just as fascinating as the high stake hands, the important hands, because you get a more real feel for the game.
I got you.
All right.
And also there's the World Poker Tour that still runs also. That's one that used to be on Travel Channel, and I'm not exactly sure where it's broadcasting now, but World Poker Tour and World Series of Poker, those are the two big main Texas Hold'em poker television shows.
Well, if you live in Roanoke or Rocky Mount or Hinton, West Virginia, I encourage you, if you want to get a real feel for the game, come over to Corned Beef and Company and sit down with Craig Wright. This has been super educational.
Yes.
Thank you, Craig.
Well, I didn't realize that you had such a fascination for the game, so it was wonderful to sit down here and go into it a little bit.
I know I'm not going to bluff with you, though.
You may get away with one with me.
One. Any last words or any places you want to recommend people if they want to reach out to you about playing poker here?
Oh, I have a Facebook page. It's called Game Craze Poker Nights, and they can look me up on my name, Craig Wright, and find it that way also. There's information with the schedule of when the game is held, but you can always just come on down to Corned Beef any Wednesday through Saturday night, and like I said, you don't have to be here when the game starts. As long as we have an open chair, we welcome you to the table, And we encourage you to come out.
When does it start?
7 o'clock, around 7 on Wednesdays and Thursdays, around 8 o'clock on Fridays and Saturdays. Yeah,
Okay, I'll
so it's
have to
great
catch
fun.
ya.
Great
Okay.
fun.
All right, HB, it's Wednesday night, so let's crack the deck open. Thanks so much,
right.
Greg.
My pleasure, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank
Greg.
you very
Yes,
much.
sir.
All right, great job.
Down in a trap game, I've been losing at roulette. Cards are bound to break me,